And that is now the BMA's position. You know, they used to be opposed to it, but they're not anymore. They say just give doctors the choice. But I think it should be a doctor in charge because they know the best methods. Do you know, it's really odd, Michelle. I had 3 deaths in not long ago. One was my husband. Alas, he died. My mother, alas, she died. And my beloved dog died. And of those 3 deaths, the death I most envied was my dog. And isn't it typically British that we will give the pets we love a pain-free, dignified, private death, but we can't offer it to the people we love?
Dame Esther Ranson, thank you very much. Wishing you the best and hoping that those new drugs you're on carry on working. And I'm going to turn now to Dr. Amy Prophet, who is a consultant in palliative medicine and also the immediate past president for the Association of Palliative Medicine. Dr. Prophet, welcome. Can you understand why Dame Esther feels as she does?
I think those on both sides of this debate have all come from a position of compassion, and I think they all want to relieve suffering. So I understand people's motives when we're discussing this. I think the debate in the House of Commons today is the wrong question, though. And I think...
Which part of it's wrong? Dying people should have the option of requesting medical assistance to end their lives?
We've not yet had the conversation in the public domain. And that should happen first before this is discussed within the Commons itself. It's become this nonsensical binary question of are you for this or are you against? And it's far more nuanced than that. You cannot drill it down, and it feels reminiscent to me for the public saying that there is increased demand of Brexit. We don't know what it is that we're voting for.
But you are sure you're against it, aren't you?
I am against the law that's being proposed, that's being discussed in Holyrood, in the House of Keys, in Jersey and in Westminster, that puts this back into the centre of healthcare and for a doctor's duty to do this. I think there could be another way.
So what's that other way?
There could be a civic legal model, a social legal model, where we have it hermetically sealed outside of the NHS, where it would be very, very dangerous and harmful. We know the safeguards that have been suggested around the world are not safe at all and are challenged as discriminatory. And I'm not trained in law as a doctor. I cannot determine coercion. I cannot determine whether someone is going through this for their free will. So if you had a social legal model, you would have lawyers, psychiatrists, suicide prevention models, all in
Perhaps that is what we end up with, because we don't know yet what this could lead to within the England and Wales legal system, for example. Let's imagine that there was a real desire to change the law. So you think it would then end up, would you then not be against people having the right in this way? You'd be more concerned with the system that put it into practice?
Absolutely. I think that good end-of-life care is vital. If there's one bad death in this country, I think that should be examined. That care should be carefully examined. There is a £77 million deficit on hospice funding currently. There are 180,000 people a year that die without specialist palliative care, without access to good care. So to keep palliative care at part of that system, that palliative care can be given whilst a different model is in process, I think is vitally important.
And a lot of that is about keeping free from pain. But this would be, wouldn't it, about giving people a tool that they don't otherwise have. And I want to put to you the case of Wendy Mitchell, who wrote about her dementia and who died in February and who left this last blog to be published by her daughters after her death. And one of the things she said is that in the end I died simply by deciding not to eat or drink anymore. She had had an accident, and not having food and water was the only legal way that she was able to take her own life. And she said the only legal choice we shouldn't have in life is when to be born. For everything else, we as humans should have a choice of how we live and a choice of how we die. Even the most wonderful palliative care imaginable could not stem the incoming tide of dementia. It was up to me to do that. Now, ending up being in the position where you stop yourself eating or drinking it's not the way anyone should die. It must be terrible psychologically, terrible for your body. What is wrong with her having a tool now that could give her death in a different way?
I think one thing we do need to be clear on it is this idea of choice and autonomy, we already know in this country that our freedoms have to be restricted to protect vulnerable, to protect the sick, protect those with dementia. Did we not, during the pandemic, stay at home to protect the vulnerable, to protect those with dementia, to protect those with disability? We already know that healthcare freedoms have to be restricted, and that's for the good of society. So if we are going to legalise this and have a system and have people have the right to have that, it can't be in the NHS. It's deeply dangerous in healthcare. It could be seen as cost saving for the government even. And I think we need to now explore a conversation in the general public of a different system and not look to physicians-assisted suicide.
So you wouldn't do it if there was a system that where it was akin to a sort of specialism within healthcare. You wouldn't do it as a palliative care doctor?
Absolutely not, no.
In no circumstances?
Absolutely
not even to
not.
help someone in the kind of position that Wendy Mitchell was in, where they are absolutely in their right mind, there's no issue at all about how they want to end their life with dignity?
I absolutely love my job as a palliative care doctor. What I do is a privilege, to be with someone at the most vulnerable, to relieve their suffering, which is what palliate means, and to provide them life. What I do in my job is about living well until the very, very end, and providing a good death.
But you must see people who are going through unimaginable suffering and who would rather it ended sooner rather than later.
What I do is I work very carefully with them and their family. I use my specialist skills as a specialty doctor to relieve that suffering on many, many different ways, using talking therapies, mental health therapies, as well as physical pain relief and other types of skills that I've developed through years and years of training.
I think you're saying you might increase the pain relief in that.
We use different types of pain relief. I think, again, the country is under the misapprehension that
some
the
of
only
those do
pain relief
hasten
is
death,
opiates.
but some of those do hasten death.
The doctrine of double effect is not true, no. They do not hasten death. Nothing that I do changes the time when someone dies. It does not hasten nor prolong their dying. They die of their physiological disease, and not by any process that I do as a doctor.
Dr. Amy Prophet, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
28 minutes past 8 now. Let's turn to the sports news and more drama in the race for the Premiership. Carthy is back with us.
Nick, thank you. Yeah, it really has been a fascinating weekend in the title races in both the Premier League and the Scottish Premiership. There was a thrilling North London derby with Arsenal taking a 3-0 lead against Tottenham, then having to hold on in the final few minutes for a 3-2 victory. Manchester City then beat Nottingham Forest 2-0. That means Arsenal finished the day top of the table with City 1 point behind them, but they do have a game in hand. Bournemouth beat Brighton 3-0 to guarantee finishing the season with their highest top flight points total. Well, in the Scottish Premiership title race, Celtic are just 3 points ahead of Rangers, and they have one more Old Firm derby to come in the final 4 games. In the WSL, Manchester City are 6 points clear at the top of the table. They beat Bristol City 4-0, and that relegates Bristol City. Now, England's women finished the weekend with a third consecutive Rugby Union Six Nations Grand Slam and a 6th title in a row. I'm delighted to say and speak to the England captain. Good morning, Marley Packer.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. Now, you had a very early flight straight after that match. Have you had a little time to celebrate now? No.
No, not really, to be honest. And then I'm off to Butlins today with my son, so just going to enjoy some downtime this week, spend some quality family time with him, and then back to it next week for the PWR.
Yeah, straight back into it, as always. It was a really successful tournament, 5 wins out of 5. You said after your first game that you wanted to take the handbrake off. What did you mean by that, and were you able to do it during the championship?
Yeah, we definitely did it during the championship. It was very successful for us. We started pre-season back eight weeks ago for the Red Roses, and our head coach John Mitchell shown us a video of his granddaughter on a go-kart just like tearing it up around the garden, and she was just like ripping the handbrake up and down, and it was just quite a funny video. They basically showed it to us to be like, this is what I want you girls to do, enjoy it, let the handbrake off, and you know what will be, but he thinks we'll have a very good success by doing that. And I think we grew over the tournament. The first couple of games we were just missing our last pass, or a knock-on would happen around the breakdown, or something would happen and it wouldn't quite go our way. but then later on in the tournament, especially the game against Ireland in Twickenham, we actually smashed it, and it was really good for us.
Yeah, it's a really good visual, the handbrake off. I understand what you mean there. You're building up as England captain to a World Cup in this country next year. You mentioned John Mitchell, relatively new England coach. What have you been learning about the variety of styles that he's been talking about wanting to play?
I think he sees the game much differently than what I've ever had a coach see before. The style of play, he wants to be direct. We talk about being confrontational, but then also with that playing a lot of different games, whether it's a kicking game to a wide game through our backs. We are not one-dimensional. Like, our set piece is phenomenal. Our line out, our scrum has been really good this Six Nations. But actually, that's about giving the squad front football. And then when we release the backs, they let the handbrake off, and they've scored some wonderful tries this season.
Yeah. And one thing I just wanted to ask you to finish was, obviously it's not an England problem, but the lack of competitive matches, is that a problem for the championship itself? I know there are more contracts. You were a plumber originally while also playing for England. That's changed with professional contracts, which the other countries seem to be playing catch up, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. But the gap is closing, and it's for us as the Red Roses to make sure that we keep pushing on and keep that gap bigger. But if you look at where the league is, PWR, I think it's the best league in the world, and we attract so many overseas players because of that. But that's pushing on. Scotland have had a great tournament this season. Ireland have. Wales have not had their best tournament, but you know, the professionalism is getting there for them. Wales have had full-time contracts now for 2 years. Ireland are in a really good place. Scotland have also got full-time contracts. So it's just one of them. France have full-time contracts. I think that's our biggest scoreline against France in about 6 years, to be honest with you. It's always a really tight game when we play them, and one that is always a decider for the Six Nations.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us this morning. England captain Marley Packer, thank you.
And thank you very much indeed, Kathy. Well, let's hear from Tom now. Tom Sutcliffe, who's with us in the studio ahead of this morning start of the week. Morning, Tom.
Morning. We've got a cure for terrestrial parochialism this morning. We're going to range from the almost inconceivably large, the edge of the observable universe, roughly 46 billion light years away, to the unimaginably small gravitons, hypothetical particles thought to be billions and billions of times lighter than electrons. And somehow all of this fits inside the human brain. At least it fits inside the brains of our guests. Lisa Kaltenegger, who helps in the hunt for alien life in the cosmos. Claudia de Ram, developing new theories about the force that holds everything together, gravity. And Mark Fromhold, who knows how the most otherworldly theories have the ability to change the world we have to live on. Let's start the week properly cosmic, just after 9.
Thank you very much, Tom. The weather, meanwhile, on Earth today, heavy rain for many in the west, northern Scotland, sunnier and milder to the southeast, breezy.
You're listening to Today on Radio 4, Michelle Hussain and Nick Robinson at 26 minutes to 9. Charles Carroll's got a summary of the news.
BBC News has learned that there's a growing expectation that Humza Yousaf will quit as First Minister of Scotland, and that an announcement could come as soon as later today. He's been struggling to gather support after ending the SNP's power-sharing agreement with the Scottish Greens last week. The Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, is due to meet Ireland's Foreign Minister, Michael Martin, in London, as a row deepens about the number of migrants travelling from the UK into the Republic. The Irish government has said that it will put in place a new returns policy, something the UK has said it would not accept. MPs will this afternoon debate whether assisted dying should be legalised for people who are terminally ill. Campaigners, led by Dame Esther Ranson, have gathered more than 200,000 signatures calling for the change. She has terminal cancer and told us that a change in the law would mean that she could look forward to a pain-free death surrounded by people she loves. And a Hamas delegation is to meet on
we've seen is that the expenditure on the main disability benefit, PIP as it's called, specifically on people with, quote, mixed anxiety and depressive disorders, cost £7.5 million about 10 years ago. It now costs 1.6 billion. Is the reality that if you're in government, you will have to get this welfare benefit down? You will have to say to some people who are on penny payments, I'm sorry, you can't have it anymore.
There are too many people not in work, and people who can work should work. But it's important.
What's the answer to the question then? That you will have to get people off that benefit?
So there are a number of things that could happen. So, for example, putting a duty on job centres to break down barriers to good employment. At the moment, there's no duty to collaborate with other services, for example, the NHS. So, if you put a duty on the job centres to work with the NHS, to actively helping people getting the mental health support that they need, then that's where breaking down barriers to work. One of the things about PIP at the moment is that if you take on a job, if you try work, then you risk losing your PIP and having to go through another lengthy assessment if the job doesn't work out, and that discourages people from taking work. So what we have said is that people should be able to take work without risking losing their entitlement to PIP. So encouraging people to take that plunge into work.
Okay. Ellie Reeves, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
20 to 9. The BBC World Service is beginning 3 days of a special focus on media freedom around the world ahead of Press Freedom Day 2024, which falls on Friday. It includes a film about the experience of journalist Adnan El-Bursh, who worked for BBC Arabic in Gaza for 15 years before October the 7th, and who then began to cover this war, as well as trying to keep his family safe. The BBC has not been able to send journalists into Gaza other than on very limited embeds with the Israeli military. Adnan fled his home, which was subsequently destroyed, and slept on the street at one point with his wife and children. His film, Reporting Gaza, My War, is on the BBC iPlayer. There's a written version on the BBC website, and this is his story, as told by Dalia Haider.
It's October 9th. Jabalia in northern Gaza is being bombed. Adnan is covering the story for BBC Arabic. Adnan was born and raised in the district and still lives there with his wife and children.
أنا كنت فيها. بعد 10 دقائق من مغادرة المكان انضرب المكان.
I was just there that day. 10 minutes after leaving the place, it was completely destroyed.
October 12th. An Israeli strike on a tower block kills dozens. Adnan and his team head to the local Ashifa hospital. Standing among the dead and injured, Adnan's cameraman breaks down in tears. One of his closest friends is lying on a stretcher, covered in severe burns.
فكان المشهد مروع يعني.
The scene was horrible. The number of dead I saw was not normal. You feel that the danger has reached you, your neighborhood, your friends.
October 13th. Israeli planes drop thousands of leaflets telling civilians they will be safer if they move to the south of the Gaza Strip. They fall like confetti across the city.
حسيت إن رسالة تهديد.
I felt the message was threatening. A threat to me personally and a threat to everyone around. You will all be killed.
The Israeli military told us they encouraged civilian evacuation using radio broadcasts, a dedicated Arabic website, millions of phone calls, and leaflets. Along with tens of thousands of Gazans, Adnan makes the decision to leave. A personal exodus and a professional story to cover.
Ruins, and Adnan El-Bursh has sent us this report from one end.
October 16. Adnan and his family find an apartment in Khan Yunis in the south of the Strip, but have to evacuate after being told the building is a target.
Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip has continued. The Qatari news network Al Jazeera said the family of its correspondent was killed in a strike on a refugee camp.
October 25th. An Israeli missile attack kills several members of Al Jazeera's Wa'il al-Dahdouh's family. Adnan and Wa'il have been friends and colleagues for more than 20 years. That night, Adnan wakes up in his sleep. his face wet with tears.
I was confused. I asked myself, is this a direct attack against Wael? His family were bombed in the same area my family were in.
When reporting on the attack, Adnan's emotions get the better of him. Live on TV, he stalls and starts to cry. The Israeli military told us they take all operationally feasible measures to mitigate harming civilians, including journalists. They say they have never and will never deliberately target journalists. On February 10th, Adnan is given permission to leave Gaza. After nearly 4 months covering the war, he leaves to join his family, who were evacuated several weeks before him.
In Gaza now, people are eating grass, while I'm here eating in a clean hotel. When I eat this food, it tastes like poison. I can't eat it. My first and last choice is Gaza. I must go back. But when will it all end? No one knows.
The words of Adnan El-Bursh, whose film is on the BBC iPlayer. Well, the executive producer on it was Munaba, head of the digital production hub at the BBC World Service. And Mona, I think we have a sense from that of the emotions of Adnan and his colleagues, and you were looking after them from this end, if you like. Tell us about some of the hardest moments in these last few months.
That's true. I think in my personal experience, that was one of the hardest tasks, to look after the Gaza team. I think one of the hardest moments that we went through, and I say we went through because it was a common experience, living all these emotions with Adnan and the rest of the team, is when he had to leave his home. And, you know, cramming more than 10 people in a small car with his family, not knowing exactly where to go. Also, when he ended up sleeping in the street with his children, as a father, you know, he did feel at the time that he was failing his children. He did say that he felt that it was a huge blow to him that he couldn't do more to help them. Also, when Adnan came very, very close to an airstrike and he lost his hearing temporarily, and that lasted for a few days, when he talked a lot about when he learned that his home was destroyed, and he was talking about his photo albums that he lost, all the memories he didn't take from that his parents left him. It's, you know, small moments, but one after one they do accumulate, and they bring this very, very strong emotion that causes lots of psychological damage on the long run, on the children, on the parents, and especially parents that have to leave their children behind to continue their duty.
To BBC colleagues?
Yes, Adnan specifically had to separate from his children to continue the coverage of the war. He had to leave them in a location away from the place where he was based with the rest of the team. And every day he was sick with worry, especially that communication was very, very poor. And it's still very poor in Gaza, which means that for days sometimes he wouldn't be able to get in touch with them to make sure that they're okay. And I think it was even more difficult after he learned about the death of Wael, which is a journalist's family, in an airstrike.
His son Hamza and others who died before.
That's true. So that brought it as well very, very close to home. Especially that Adnan's family was not very far from Wael at the time. So again, there was this struggle. Should I go back and die with my family? We die together than them dying without me, or me dying without them. That's the sentence that we hear from him in the film. And it was really painful.
Thank you so much for talking to us about it. And if anyone goes on the iPlayer and searches for Reporting Gaza, my war.
It's now 12 minutes to 9. It is a big week in politics. not just because it now looks all but certain that Scotland's First Minister will quit, but because elections for local councils in England and for the big mayors in the biggest cities in England will play a crucial role in setting the scene for the general election, perhaps setting the scene for a challenge to Rishi Sunak's leadership as well. So to look ahead, I've been speaking to Professor Sir John Curtis, polling guru of course. And I began by asking the Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow for his thoughts on the latest developments in Scottish politics.
The essential problem that the SNP face is that there is no way of them being able to sustain a government in Holyrood without the cooperation of the Greens. That's what's become evident in the last 4 days. One of the unionist parties are willing to help the SNP out because they all think they can profit from this weakness in the next Westminster election. Meanwhile, the party itself has decided it cannot proceed to be negotiating with either, and the Southern Splitting Party. That is unacceptable. There is only way to run this government. That is with the Greens, and it is with the Greens that Mr. Youssef has won a voter's votes.
Let's turn then to this big electoral test, perhaps the last one before the general election. What are you looking for after people have voted on Thursday?
The difficulty that the Conservatives face is not only are they currently running 20 points behind Labour in the opinion polls in Westminster, but most of the seats and contests that are being fought over on Thursday were last contested in May 2021 when Boris Johnson was still Prime Minister and the Conservatives were 6 points ahead in the opinion polls. So this is a difficult wicket for them to defend. Now, that said, don't necessarily expect much in the way of dramatic headlines as far as local councils are concerned. In any case, it's only 1 in 3 of the seats being contested. Many of the councils are already in Labour control, but there are places like Dorset, Basildon, Gloucester that the Conservatives could lose. A lot of the focus in practice, I think, is going to be on 2 contests, rightly or wrongly. That is in Tees Valley and in the West Midlands, where the Conservatives hold the position at the moment. They're now looking to try and defend it, perhaps to some degree against the odds. So these are the 2 mayoral positions. Now, whether or not these are actually a good indication of the Conservatives in the general election is another matter, because in these mayoral contests, personal voting matters. So even if the Conservatives defend these mayoralities, that will not necessarily be an indication that they are making progress. There are 2 important things about last year's local elections that were bad news for the Conservatives. The first was they were losing votes more heavily in places they were trying to defend. And secondly, voters were voting tactically against them for whichever Labour or the Democrats were better able to defeat them. If those patterns are gaining evidence this time, it will indicate a mood whereby the electorate seems to be quite keen to get rid of this government, and that the electoral system is at risk of working very heavily against them in the forthcoming election.
There'll be real things to learn from the results and politically convenient things to learn. Are you suggesting that if the Tories do hold on to their high profile as Rishi Sunak may grab that lifeline and say, see, things aren't as bad as you think they are?
Oh, of course, and you can understand why the Conservatives might do that. I think we can anticipate that they will focus on that and say, look, the Labour Party couldn't win places that, we're defending from 2021. We're back to being making progress. Another reason why the Conservatives, these results may not be as bad for them as perhaps some expectations have generated, is that because reform are not on the ballot for many people, will people who have switched from Conservative to Reform according to the national polls still vote for the Conservatives in these local elections? That could also be a crucial lifeline for Rishi Sunak.
Professor Sir John Curtis, thanks very much for joining us. It is now 9:08. When Tim Lawton, a member of the Commons Home Affairs Committee, touched down in Djibouti in Africa, he didn't expect much of a fuss. He didn't expect there to be very long, but in fact, they wouldn't let him get past the front desk. Tim Lawton joins us on the line now. Good morning to you. What happened?
Morning, Nick. Well, it's all a bit odd, really. I've been on a delegation to neighbouring Somaliland for a few days before, which is a really interesting part of the world, and one where China poses a bit of a threat. And then the rest of my colleagues came back via Ethiopia, but I thought I'd come back via Djibouti, which is Africa's smallest country, to see to see what's going on there, but also to have a meeting with the ambassador for a debrief on my way back. And I was literally going to spend about 30 hours there before getting the plane home to London.
But once they
wouldn't let
looked
me
at
in.
your passport, they wouldn't let you in, no?
No, so I arrived, I was the first one off the plane. I arrived in the arrivals hall, went up to immigration, gave them my passports, got some strange looks, then they scanned my passport, asked what I did, told my Member of Parliament, and then it all went very frosty.
You think this is because of your criticisms of China, do you, and the fact that they are close to China?
Yeah, there's no other reason not to let me in. All you need to get a visa, and I tried to get one online before I left, but their website kept crashing. But all you need is proof of where you're staying and your ticket to leave the country, which I have, and correspondence to the ambassador and everything else. There's no reason not to let me into the country. But Djibouti is effectively a vassal state of China. We've been making quite a lot of criticisms of China in our trip in Somaliland because of the threat they pose in the region. They are the biggest creditors to Djibouti. About half the economy is in hock to China. They've got a quarter share in Djibouti port, which is a big strategic port. They've got a Chinese defence base there now with 2,000 soldiers and a pier big enough for a Chinese aircraft carrier. So basically what China wants Djibouti kowtows to, and having a troublesome MP who's been sanctioned by China turning up on the doorsteps clearly was something they didn't want to entertain. So I was escorted onto the first plane home.
Visit by Mr. Lawton is not what they wanted. Lawton, thank you very much indeed for telling us that. And we ought to say, for the sake of fairness, that a Chinese embassy spokesman says this story is purely baseless. It is fabricated and slanderous rhetoric that attempts to smear China and poison China-UK relations.
5 to 9 is the time. You might have heard of the robocall voters in New Hampshire got in January with what sounded very much like President Biden's voice, telling them it was unnecessary to vote in the primary in their state. It was an AI-generated fake, and it highlights what the think tank Demos believes the UK needs ahead of our general election, an agreement between the parties not to use these tools in campaigning. We're joined by Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, who's a signatory on a letter, an open letter Demos has put together, and Polly Curtis, the chief executive of Demos, is also here. Morning to you both. Polly, is there evidence of that New Hampshire-style deep fake or anything like it here?
Well, the one that really sent shivers down spines was the audio of Keir Starmer last year berating Labour staffers. No one's ever got to the bottom of who created that, but it was certainly a deep fake, and Labour said it wasn't real. So
there's no evidence that it was from a rival political
There's no evidence that it was from a rival political party. What we're doing today is calling the political parties to come together to agree this cross-party agreement on what they can do within their campaigns to ensure that they don't inadvertently create any deep fakes that contribute to this culture of mistrust that will grow around these projects.
Jimmy, how worried are you about this?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty worried. I mean, one of the things that we want the political parties to be incredibly careful about is actually amplifying deepfakes. It's quite easy for anybody to be fooled by something they see online that's circulating. But most people understand when you see something random on the internet, you don't necessarily believe it. If it comes from your MP repeating or endorsing it, suddenly they put their trust behind it. And that makes the problem much, much worse. It's something that the political parties should all step forward and say, we won't do this, and we won't be incredibly careful.
Neither create it nor amplify it with certain.
And I think it's important to say that these tools are amazing and wonderful, and they can be used